I was so petrified. They told me that I had to come in and get prepped, right? And so one of the guys that worked for me, he traveled all over the world. He was with the military, and he told me, like, when you start to go out, like, don't fight it, just see the white light and let yourself go, right? So I remember all these nurses were prepping me, and they're sanding my head and to put all the probes on all over my brain. And then somebody else took my arm, and I don't know if they were putting intravenous in me or something, but I literally saw the white light and passed out. And I remember them slapping me, and I like wake up. It's like, what do you want? I thought I'm supposed to go, right? And she goes, oh, no, you're like an hour away from surgery. We're just prepping you right now, and you got to stay conscious, right? Like, I was petrified.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dichotomy podcast. This is a show dedicated to exploring the dichotomies we experience in business and in life. My name's Mike Reid, and I'm a guy who's incredibly fascinated by understanding why we make the decisions we do in life, and ultimately, how do we lead a good life? As a business owner, I get the pressures of managing business, family, money, health can create great inner conflicts around what we actually want out of our business and our lives. This podcast is dedicated to exploring just that. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, ladies and gents. It is Mike Reid here, and thank you for joining me for today's episode of the Dichotomy podcast with Rob Ell. Now, Rob's a gentleman who I met based in Vancouver, Canada. Rob's got a really fascinating background story. We happened to jump on the phone the other day, and we got connected on LinkedIn through Dent and whatever else it may be. But I got to learn that Rob's had an incredible career. He's been very successful as an entrepreneur. He actually spent most of his career in sales and consulting, but he also built a theme park, which I found fascinating. His parents bought this theme park when he was kind of a young kid, a teenager, and he and the family kind of built this theme park into something that ended up becoming very, very successful. They built it, they sold it, and Rob spent the last 10 years just enjoying a bit of a sabbatical, and now he's kind of getting back into the professional world again. But part of the reason why he spent so long in sabbatical was because at age 49, Rob was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And as you can imagine, that brain tumor just totally rocked his world. And so in this episode, we get into more of Rob's story and journey around, what that was like the impact that had from, the standpoint of just the sheer terror and, just absolute terror of going into hospital and dealing with that and, confronting death, confronting the impact that has on him, on his own emotions, but the emotions of the people around him that care about him the most. An incredibly terrifying experience, and yet, some incredible lessons that were learned through that journey. And so we get to hear more of Rob's experience around that. And for me, it really did impact me around just the importance of health. I think what a better time to record this episode than in the middle of a pandemic and really kind of reconnect to actually what matters in life. So we get into all those important questions and more in this episode. I think you'll really, really love it. I hope you enjoy it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rob Ell to the show. So Rob Ell, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Looking forward to it, Mike.
Cool, man. Hey, I appreciate it. We haven't actually met before, but we connected through, I think it was LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yep.
To begin with. And we got on the phone, we had a chat, and we kind of had a bit of a mutual history. I'm a member of EO here in Toronto, and you were a member of EO in the past in Vancouver.
Right.
And I find any EOers, whether a past or present, always have kind of like a bit of a shared connection right from the outset.
Absolutely.
And I was fascinated by what I heard of your story. So hence why I was kind of really interested to get you on the show. But just to kick us off, can you describe your space right now? Whereabouts are you?
I am in beautiful Vancouver, BC, Canada, overlooking the ocean. I live on the 16th floor, and it's called the West End, or in English Bay.
Can you see the ocean from literally kind of where you're sitting?
I can see the ocean right from my window where I'm sitting with the freighters out there right now. And unfortunately, it's pouring rain today, but we've had a really nice weather, but this week's been pretty choppy. Yesterday wasn't too bad.
What's it like in Vancouver? Is it always raining? I keep hearing it's like 300 days a year raining.
No, I mean, it rains a lot usually in the wintertime. We had an amazing winter this year, and the summers are just wonderful. So usually from June to September. I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan, on the prairie, so I pinch myself every day, even if it's pouring rain.
What's it like in the prairies in Saskatchewan?
Oh, it's just flat and it's cold, and you got locusts, and it was like
Locusts.
quite the place to grow up. I remember when I'd be running to school sometimes, you've probably seen that on TV, and there's like thousands of locusts fly into the air that they'd be hiding in the grass, right?
Kidding me.
It's really something, yeah.
There you go. Are locusts dangerous? Will they bite you?
Oh, no, they're just like giant grasshoppers. But when
Oh,
they're really big and they're landing on you and you're a kid, you never forget that.
I thought a plague of locusts was like one of those horrible plagues that, in biblical times got sent down.
Yeah. That was one of the joys of living there. And then you have the extreme, wind and snow and everything in the wintertime, and then the hot, dry weather in the summer on the prairies. So
Yeah, right.
I mean, you get up every day with the beauty of the mountains here and the ocean and biking and skiing and going to Whistler. And I live in the west end of Vancouver, which is where the heritage homes are. So I guess in the early 1900s, this whole area was just these beautiful old heritage homes, which kind of reminds me of where I grew up in Regina. I used to spend every weekend with my grandparents. And so where I live tomorrow morning at 9:00, they have a farmer's market. So you can imagine all these beautiful old homes from the 1920s, and they've all been restored, and it's all these beautiful trees and parks, and then there's a farmer's market tomorrow. So when I'm right downtown in this area where I live, it's like kind of like Mayberry Street. And yet when you look up, you can see all the towers around us. The new towers are 60 stories high. So I'm like 10 minutes from walking downtown and being right downtown as well.
Stunning. Rob, we're going to get into more of your kind of career and all that sort of stuff as we go. But I mean, you've built and sold successful multi-million-dollar businesses and all that kind of thing. But tell us more about your childhood. I'm curious to learn more about that.
I grew up in Regina, and my dad was a commercial artist. And so he married, my mom's family was from Switzerland. And so my dad, I don't think had ever been outside of Regina until he met my mom. And so he was very curious. So when I was a kid, I remember we would take these trips to California all the time for 2 weeks in the wintertime to get out of Regina. And so, given that he was a commercial artist and he had a lot of art friends, I kind of was in this bubble of being in Saskatchewan and then being in LA, visiting all these art people, which was just amazing over my lifetime.
What was one of the most interesting experiences you had, visiting other artists in LA or anywhere else?
Well, my dad used to work, I believe it was Neon Products back in the 60s. I think he used to blow glass. I think Jimmy Pattison owns that company now. But his friend, his name was Bob Zoll, and he's a really famous artist in LA right now. He's been commissioned to do work in the Los Angeles airport. And so every year we used to go and see him and his wife, Mary. And it was like every year you didn't know what they were going to be into. One year he was all into Mickey Mouse stuff. So he literally, the whole house was full of Disney memorabilia. And then the next year he'd sell all that. And I remember, I don't know what century it was, but it was like old furniture from like almost looked like the prairies and stuff. Like just, I couldn't believe their whole house was full of this. And it was super expensive, right? But it was just this stuff you'd see in a field somewhere that had been out there for 100 years. So every year we never knew what he was going to be into.
And were you close to your parents?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And my grandparents. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents on the weekends.
How do you feel your childhood and your upbringing shaped maybe it sounds like a silly question as I talk it through, but how much did your childhood shape the kind of entrepreneur that you ended up becoming? Was there a strong influence there, or?
Oh, absolutely. So my grandpa wasn't really an art. My mom's parents, but my dad's parents were very conservative. But my dad always wanted to go on his own. So I think when he was like 20 years old, he already started his own sign company. So when he started, he worked out of my grandpa's garage in the back. And then eventually he had a shop. And so most of the time when I was a kid, he either had a shop at the house where he was working out of the garage in the back, or he had a sign shop in our basement. So back then, there was no voicemail and all that. So my mom, I remember, would answer the phone upstairs, right? She answered the business phone, and then she'd yell downstairs like, "You got a customer on the phone." And, so my mom was answering the phone, and he was downstairs, literally drawing a picture. Like he would go, with all of our branding and everything today, he would literally go like, "Okay, here's what I think your sign should be." And then he painted that by hand, right? This was way before computers and all that. So just amazing to see all the different things. And eventually he started painting billboards. So I'd see him make these giant billboards. So the billboard we had at our theme park, which was built when I was in my teens, that was one of the biggest billboards on the Canadian highway, because that was the best thing he knew. That was really the best thing he knew how to build, right? So that was the first thing he kind of designed for our theme park.
Yeah, it's amazing. It makes me reflect on just how far technology and business has come, in that period of time where, like how, think about how efficiently we can get stuff done today, or how quickly we can get stuff done today compared to, back then, where you're like, your mum picks up the phone, yells down, he walks upstairs, talks to the customer, goes back down, keeps painting.
Yeah. And I remember, my dad had a little pocket in his shirt, and he had one of those little white notepads and a pen, right? And he used to tell me if he couldn't keep it written down on that notepad, he didn't want to know about it, right? So it's like, it was like so simple. And then when I was a little older, I used to go to the sign shop when eventually he left the house and had a shop outside of the home. And I would go and answer the phone for him on Saturdays. And then he would take me to McDonald's. And this was the first time McDonald's had come to Regina. So that was a big deal, where he would buy me lunch at McDonald's, and I always get a Big Mac and a fries and a orange pop and a hot apple pie. And I remember when McDonald's opened, and they had a cow outside to show, this beef was coming right off the farm. But I can remember all those things. I remember the first answering machine and how expensive it was for him to actually have this answering machine, and then to see the fax machines and all this stuff evolve. And, I have, my kids are in their 20s now, and I tell them stories about this, and they just kind of glaze over like, whatever, right? Like, I've seen so much change in my time, and the change that they've seen, since they've been kids is just mind-boggling.
And yet it's funny, how old are your kids?
My daughter's 27 and my son's 24.
So, I can obviously relate to them a little bit more. And it's like, even in their lifetime or my lifetime, we've experienced a lot of change, but I don't feel like it's the same chasm that you would have experienced, going like right back to when you were a kid to today. It's like, even I sort of remember one of my earlier, memories of I don't know, like being 10 years old or whatever, getting 14 years old, I think I had a mobile phone and things like that, and so, you tend to, I don't know, you tend to take things as fairly given at that age. And it's like, oh, this thing pops up and then this thing pops up, and you get to 20 and you and then 25, and then you realize, oh shit, like all these things are actually pretty remarkable inventions and explosions of technology. And back then you kind of take it for granted. Whereas, as you say, like you've seen such a evolution. I'm curious that within that, there must of course be this dichotomy between, and I think about this too, of, the good old days where everything was a lot simpler, and you mustn't have been rushing around maybe I should ask you, like, I'm imagining you weren't rushing around, like, trying to squeeze and jam in every ounce and unit of productivity into every minute of in every hour of every day. And so it was just such a different way of life compared to today. What do you notice with that, Rob? What do you see as like the positive and the negative extremes of, life back then versus life today?
Well, and I'm really consciously aware of this because I really try and make technology work for me, right? But I just see there's so many people that are just completely overwhelmed with this technology. And when you put a smartphone in somebody's hand, right, I don't think that serves their happiness. And when you see the loneliness factor that we're having, and how the anxiety in these kids today, and the loneliness of the people in these old folks homes, right? And to go back when I was a kid and I spent a lot of time with my parents, and you knew where all your friends were, where everybody's bike was on somebody's lawn, right? So you kind of walked down the street, you weren't in a rush to go anywhere, and you'd see all the bikes on somebody's lawn. Well, that's where you knew everybody was, right? And I think we spend a lot more time just kind of hanging out as people, right? Like just ever since we were kids, right? And then with my grandparents, and I think it was a much closer family unit back then. And today, you just see the speed of people think they're in relationships with all these people on following them and all social media, but they're not really your friends, right? Like if you get into trouble, right, and you try and get some of those folks to help you, most of them don't even respond at all, right? So I think it's created quite a wedge, actually. So you really have to use it in a way, it's like you and I connecting, right? You and I would have never have met, but you reached out to me on LinkedIn and I responded, and then we had a conversation, and, so I would have never met somebody like you. So I think the scope is much bigger, right? I've got friends now all over North America, but it's just not the same.
If you want to join a community of ambitious and driven entrepreneurs, mavericks, change makers, those kind of people, then can I encourage you to head to my website, www.mikejamesreid.com. And that's Reid spelled R-E-I-D. You'll find a whole bunch of resources to be able to connect with me and a community of entrepreneurs that are up to something in the world. So head on over to www.mikejamesreid.com. Tell us more about loneliness, and was that something that you ever experienced much of as a kid? Have you found that you have experienced more or less loneliness as you've gotten older?
I'm not lonely at all. And, I start every day trying to call a couple of people. Like I've been doing that my whole life. And I think that's really helped me maintain, some amazing relationships with, even people in my family, my aunt and my other aunts and my great aunts in a home in Kamloops. And, I start my day every day trying to phone somebody to kind of kick it off. But, I think my mom really struggled with her emotions, and her and my dad had a pretty crazy relationship my whole life. So I saw them fighting a lot and splitting up and getting back together. And when my mom passed away, my daughter ended up starting to kind of hurt herself. And, I found out my daughter was diagnosed being bipolar. And then I went, oh my God, they're interviewing me about my daughter. And then I realized this is what my mom had, right? But nobody knew that back then. So having that kind of emotional struggles that she had her whole life, but nobody was talking about it back then, right? And all the challenges of having an entrepreneurial father who was doing all sorts of crazy things, so sometimes we were up and sometimes we were way down, and watching her go up and down. And so I always have really tried to kind of manage my emotions just to maintain my own sanity.
The calling a couple of people every day, is that a very deliberate practice where you have a list of people that you plan to call, or is it just whoever pops into your mind?
No, whoever pops into my mind. It's just, and it's interesting because even when I call people, sometimes they know, like, oh my God, I was thinking about you the other day, right? Like I just have this intuitive sense, and a lot of my friends have the same thing. So what was really cool, my mom's parents, who are from Switzerland, my grandpa, when he retired, he used to do a lot of contracting work and stuff. But when he retired, he would go around to all these widows in Regina and do their honeydew list. So a lot of them had lost their husbands. And I remember as a kid when I would spend the weekend with them, and every day we'd load up the car on Saturdays and we'd go to all these ladies' homes, and my grandpa would, paint stuff for them and fix their bathroom or whatever they needed. And they'd always make us a nice lunch. And, when my grandpa passed away, it was amazing how many people were at his funeral and how many lives he had touched. And that's something that I'll never forget.
Wow, what a wonderful story. Because I feel, Rob, we put so much emphasis on in life, just, going out and achieving big things in business, let's say. As entrepreneurs, well, certainly I'll speak from my own experience that I certainly place a heavy weighting on achievement, and rightly or wrongly, that's kind of a little bit the way that I'm wired. And often we think about achievement in such grand terms. It's about solving big problems for the planet or building a big business, or having a big team, or all these kind of things. And yet, when you share that story, it's really, is there a greater form of achievement than touching the lives of so many people in your community and having them, come to your funeral because of how you've, touched and moved them.
Yeah. And if you look at reverse engineering, right, and when you go to a funeral, right, and they say the lesson going to a funeral is you get to see behind the veil, right, for a couple hours, and everybody's really moved, and they really start to hear the stories of that person, and they never talk about how many businesses you built and what car you had and where you traveled, right? It's never those stories. But everybody spends a couple hours and grieves for that person, and then they all go back to their crazy life, right? So I think that's something, and I think this pandemic is really getting people more in touch with what really matters. I was looking on LinkedIn this morning, and Gary Vaynerchuk posted an idea. He said, let's redefine success. How about being happy and making others happy too with the heart? He said, instead of she or he made money and bought things. And I thought, boy, there's a guy who's always on the cutting edge of what's real today.
Speaking of running around in our crazy lives, Rob, I'd love for you to share more with the listeners. Tell us more about your kind of career and professional life. Just kind of take us back to, I guess, it doesn't have to be a whole life story, but whatever you think were kind of some of the meaningful moments in your career that sort of defined you or sort of stood out for you.
So I grew up in Kelowna. So we left Regina. We moved to California and then back to Regina. Then my aunt moved to Kelowna. Back then, one of my first jobs was finding golf balls at the golf course in the creek. And there was a mini golf there. So I used to go with my friends, and we'd walk up the creek bed and find all these golf balls in the mud. You literally have to go with your hands and go through the mud, finding these balls, and we'd wash them. And then I would sell them to the guy at the mini golf. And he eventually said, hey, I'm looking for some help. I think I was only 11 or 12. And I got a job at the mini golf, and it's a beautiful little mini golf there where I had to sell ice cream bars and chips and, get the clubs out and everything for people and sweep the fairways. And from there, we ended up building a theme park. So kind of a couple of years later, we're building a theme park. So I grew up building a Flintstones Bedrock City. And I was 13 at the time. So we bought 20 acres of property and didn't have a lot of money. And so I learned, with all the older guys and all the machinery. And I always lived in the city before. So now we lived in the country against a 7,000 foot mountain with a where was a beautiful waterfall coming down this amazing piece of property. So I had no friends out there because there was nobody out there. It was just us and a gas station. It was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So I did that for many years and worked my way up through the rides. And I was Dino the dinosaur for quite a few years, entertaining people. And then I ended up becoming the supervisor when I think I was 15. And then I became the team leader. And then I eventually became the manager. And then when I think I was in my early 20s, my dad took me down to the Royal Bank and gave me signing authority, and him and my mom bought a big motorhome and just left me there and said, you're now running the park. So I remember people used to come to the main gate. All these salesmen used to come to the main gate to sell us something, and I'd show up, and literally they'd say, "Is there somebody older here that we could talk to, or your parents maybe?" And I'd say, "No, I'm the manager." And I saw I had a real bad taste for salespeople. Some of those guys would literally turn around and just walk away, wouldn't even talk to me. So that business was wildly successful, and I learned a lot.
Tell us more about that business. When you say wildly successful, what did you learn, and what were some of the defining moments in the journey for that?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but when we moved to Kelowna, my dad was a commercial artist, and so was the guy that built the Flintstones in Kelowna. So our two families ended up moving to Kelowna at the same time. And my dad didn't know anybody in Kelowna except my aunt. So he phoned, the guy's name was Gary Bones. So he phoned Gary up, and Gary said, "Come on over and have a beer, and I'm building a Flintstone park." Well, to most people, they think you're crazy, right? But to my dad, it's like, yeah, that sounds cool. So they would sit around at night. All you were given was a book on how to draw Fred, Barney, and Dino, and that was it. And so there was only 4 of these parks ever built. There was 2 in the States, and then the one in Kelowna, and then our park. And so Gary used to take his kids, because he lived in Regina, so they would go, you know where the presidents are carved in the mountains in South Dakota? Yeah, there was a Flintstone park there. So Gary used to take his kids there and vacation in the summer. And then he thought, well, geez, I could build one of these in Kelowna. So he got the license. So my dad literally started painting the signs and helping do a lot of the creative for that park. And we tried to buy into it. And they had a silent partner in Regina, and we didn't have a lot of money, and it was pretty much out of our price range. So my dad started to try and build It's a Small World like in Disneyland. We bought, I think we bought an acre or 2 next to the Flintstone Park, and we started to try and build that. And so the nice people at the Flintstones gave my mom, an opportunity to work there just so she had some cashier experience. This is how simple business was back then. So my mom used to come home at night and go, I don't think people are going to come to our park. And they've been at the Flintstones all day, right? And so after hearing that enough, my dad phoned Hanna-Barbera, or I guess it was Screen Gems in New York at the time. He knew who had the licensing rights because of the people in Kelowna. And I don't remember the exact number that he picked up that license, but I think it was $1,500. And so we got our own license to build our own park, but we had to be outside of a 100-mile radius of Kelowna. So of course, when the people at the Flintstones found out somebody had acquired to build another theme park in British Columbia, right, they went and fired my mom, and that ended their relationship, and it was not pretty. But we ended up getting this 20 acres of property, and away we went. And I think we bought that for $40,000. So we got 20 acres of commercial property on the number 1 highway for 40 grand. And then my dad had a partner who was a real estate developer, and my dad didn't know anything about developing and all that. But this guy had the land taken out of the land freeze and had the land reappraised for $250,000, I believe. And then they borrowed half that money at the Royal Bank, so they got a $100,000 loan. And that's how we built the park. So I think we only had, I don't know, I think my dad had $20,000 of equity or whatever.
Yeah, phenomenal.
But that first summer we opened, we had 80,000 people go through that park in 100 days, and we had 2 bathrooms. And my dad's partner did the plumbing of the bathrooms himself, so that was so bad. Yeah.
In building that business, it sounds like that was a pretty intense period of your life. Was that fair to say? Was that
Oh, absolutely. So I'm in an area where there's no kids, right? So I'm living there. We had no money. We literally lived in the food stand in this old building to try and build it. And I remember the first summer we got enough money to buy a mobile home, right? Like that was a big thing for us to actually be able to move out of the building and get a mobile home. And what happened was my dad's partner, who was a real estate developer, he just waited long enough to see if this was going to work. And it was working like a dream. I think we were only open for 2 or 3 weeks. And he went and sat my dad down underneath one of the big trees in the park. And they had a buy-sell agreement, which is pretty standard, right? So he offered my dad 85,000 for our 50%, and my dad didn't come up with the money within, I don't know, 30 days or whatever. He ended up owning the whole park. So my dad phoned the bank manager in Kelowna that had given us the financing, and he knew my dad was the creative force that really built the whole thing, right? And he gave my dad that kind of money just on his name, right? And my dad had to redo his financials to show him how the park was doing. Well, the park was doing double what he thought it was going to do, right? These are all projections just on a piece of paper, right? There was nothing, no spreadsheets and all that. But so we ended up, trying to take that to the guy, and he had a big house on the lake, and he refused to accept the deal and said he never even made the deal. So it took us a year and a half to get him to court. So I think in 1977, we ended up owning the whole park.
When did you end up selling the park?
Well, I took it over with my mom. My mom and dad got divorced in 94. So I ended up cashing my dad out. And then I kept the park till 2010 after I got my brain tumor in 09. So I sold the property in 2010. And I still own the brand. So I created Dinotown. So it used to be Flintstones. Well, we lost the Flintstone license because of my dad's shenanigans with the divorce. So I ended up having to rebrand the whole park in 95. So we bought the park in 94, ran the park. It was one of the biggest summers we ever had. And then in 95, I had to re-theme it and not sure if that was going to work. So I still own all the intellectual property and the live shows. We've taken the shows to New York, and they've been at the Pacific National Exhibition. So that's another side project I have going.
Okay. And so, Rob, on that point, right, that was one of the kind of key things I wanted to dig into on this call was you just brushed over the fact you had a brain tumor in 2009.
Yeah.
Can you dive into that? Tell us more about that experience and how did it come about? And can you take us back to maybe the moment you were told about it, and what did you kind of do next?
Yeah, so I had chronic pain in my body for years, like I don't know, 5, 8 years. So I would move around. So sometimes my arm would be killing me, or my back, and I used to go to acupuncture and physio and all this stuff. And eventually my doctor put me on some wicked painkillers. Well, then you don't feel anything. But I started reading all the side effects. So I tried to get off that, and the pain was still there. And then one day my grandpa had palsy, where the kind of your face looks like you had a stroke. So one day the left side of my face kind of fell down, like it was kind of pulling, and I couldn't feel it. It was all numb. And so I went to my doctor, and it was just like a bad TV show where he goes, and I really take care of myself. I've never broken a bone or anything. And so he says, well, I'm going to, he said, you might have a brain tumor. And I said, you can't be serious. So the x-ray place was down the hall. So he runs me down there and says, just wait in the waiting room. And if, I'll be able to get the x-rays back in a half an hour, or whatever. And if it's a tumor, I'll be able to see it. Right. So he pops it on the screen, just like you see on TV. Well, he couldn't see anything. So then he told me I had to go get an MRI, which with our Canadian healthcare system took me a long time. But once I finally got the MRI, I found out I had a very large brain tumor.
What was the impact of that at the time? Can you remember kind of hearing that news?
Oh, well, I'm just absolutely in shock. So when I was a kid, I was saying we used to go to California all the time, and I love baby aspirins. So when I was really small, I think I was 4 or 5, my mom had packed the baby aspirins in the suitcase, and I found them when they were packing, and I took them in my room, and I ate a whole bottle of baby aspirins. And my mom found out, and I got rushed to the hospital and had my stomach pumped. Well, I'll never forget that. So I have this wicked reaction in my subconscious mind. So when I was in the consulting business, I did a lot of work in healthcare. And when I used to go to a hospital with my suit on and my briefcase to sell them leadership training, as soon as I walked around a hospital, I just go sheet white. Or if I ever had to get my blood taken or whatever. So, for me to find out I've got a brain tumor was just like, oh my God. And my ex-wife's brother died of a brain tumor when he was in his 30s. So I saw him melt down too, which didn't help.
Wow, that must have been just emotionally such a taxing, difficult experience.
Oh, it was one of the most horrendous things I'd had to go through. And then, given our Canadian healthcare system, they showed me this tumor was about the size of a golf ball. And then when I went in, his name is Dr. Akigami, was my surgeon. There was a 2-page letter that he had to review with me of all the side effects that could go wrong. And I remember the last one is this could kill you. And then he turns the page over to you and says, now I went over everything, you need to sign here to make sure you understand the ramifications, right? But he was saying all these little white lines, they're like white threads you could see in the MRI. He said if any of those break, right, these ones affect your eyelids. This one's how you swallow, right? So he basically told me to go home and, at any time this tumor's growing, well, any of those things could snap, right? And so then you go home and you're waiting for your time to get your surgery. Well, because he only gets so many days in the hospital, a lot of people would bump me. So if somebody had a car accident or something, I'd get my surgery bumped. So you think it's like you're going to get your surgery on this day, and then you're just about there. And then a couple days later, they tell you, oh, you just got bumped, right? And then you don't know when you're going to be back on. So that was a long haul. And then the day they do tell you you're getting your surgery, it's like, oh no.
You must have been petrified. I mean,
I was so petrified. They told me that I had to come in and get prepped, right? And so one of the guys that worked for me, he traveled all over the world. He was with the military, and he told me, like, when you start to go out, like, don't fight it, just see the white light and let yourself go. Right. So I remember all these nurses were prepping me, and they're sanding my head and to put all the probes on all over my brain. And then somebody else took my arm, and I don't know if they were putting intravenous in me or something, but I literally saw the white light and passed out. And I remember them slapping me, and I like wake up. It's like, what do you want? I thought I'm supposed to go, right? And she goes, oh, no, you're like an hour away from surgery. We're just prepping you right now, and you got to stay conscious, right? Like, I was petrified. So I remember them rolling me to the operating room, and they asked me if they wanted me to be propped up, right? Like, no, I don't want to be propped. Just leave me laying here. And all I can remember is seeing, like in a TV show, you see the fluorescent lights going by. Yeah. And then they take you to the operating room, and it's like, metal slab that you have to lay on. And my surgeon is just an absolute gift. And he said, the last thing I'm going to remember, he literally comes and uses a Jiffy marker and writes on the side of your brain where they're going in. So he said, that's the last thing you'll remember, to make sure we go in on the right side. So he took my hand, and, he just said, everything's going to be fine. And the next thing I remember is waking up in my post-operation room.
What was that recovery like, Rob?
Oh, it was brutal. So when I woke up, I think my surgery was almost 8 hours, and I think I had 8 or 10 people working on me. So I woke up and I couldn't move, and I heard this. It was like a printer going off beside me, kind of intermittently, but I couldn't see what was going on. So my girlfriend was in the room at the time when I woke up, and they didn't shave my hair or anything on the other side. So when she was sitting in the corner of the room, she goes like, well, it doesn't look like you had anything at all, right? And then she comes around to the other side of the room and goes like, oh my God, because I had like a zipper stitching, like all where they had literally opened up my head. But what the noise was I guess I was having a morphine drip right in the side of my neck, right? Well, I couldn't see that, but I could hear the thing going off all the time. So the nurse goes, no, that's a morphine drip, right? And I had rollers on my legs, going up and down my legs in case I had a stroke. And they also put in, what do they call it, colonoscopy bag or whatever, right? So I didn't know that was going to happen either, right? So I just frozen in fear. But I was so, like, that morphine was just unbelievable how powerful that was.
Wow, what a story. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to that going, that absolutely, I can feel the terror in my own body.
Yeah. So I'm the guy that passes out when I'm going into cell leadership training. You can imagine the fear I'm in. And so I'm in my own room, and you know who Jimmy Pattison is?
No.
So Jimmy Pattison's one of the wealthiest guys in Canada, and he used to own Neon Products, and he used to personally come in and mentor us when I was in EO in Vancouver. And the wing of the hospital I was in was the Jimmy Pattison wing. It was the brand new wing. So I was so blessed to have my own room, and I was right across from the nurses station, but everybody on that floor was having a brain tumor operation. So every so many hours, you'd hear them bringing in another guy, right? And you'd hear all these people like stroking out all around me, and it was just like being in a war zone.
What was the percentage chance of you having a full recovery? Do you know?
Uh, well, not many people die from this, right? But a lot of people have major side effects where something doesn't work. And the biggest one is a lot of people have intermittent seizures when they have this surgery. So you end up losing your driver's license, right? So
Mm.
I was fortunate. I don't have any side effects. The only thing I had was when I left the hospital, my eyesight was really wonky, and I lost my confidence to drive, and I felt like I was like 80, and everybody be passing me and honking and everything, and I thought, what's going on? So I remember thinking, well, maybe I should go have my eyes checked again. And so I remember going in, and the guy who checked my eye says, I've never seen somebody's eyes change so dramatically, right? And because I'd had my eyes checked before the operation, and then this was after. And so he said, oh, we've made a mistake, right? Because the surgeons, everybody said, no, no, you don't have swelling on your brain. You're fine. Just go check your eyes again. So what had happened, I think, is somebody had given me, there had been a mistake the way they wrote down my prescription, and my glasses were all wonky, right? Because I remember, this is probably 2 or 3 weeks after I was okay. I remember putting these glasses on with the new lenses, and there was a poster behind the guy at the counter, and it's like, well, now I can see, right? But I thought, holy smokes, am I going to have to spend the rest of my life like looking this way? And I was kind of stumbling down the street, and I was having a hard time driving my car.
So it turned out you just had the wrong glasses.
Yeah, the guy I think he had written down somebody made a mistake getting my glasses, right?
That's bad timing, right? Just after you've had brain surgery.
About scaring you big time this is going to be the rest of my life. Yeah.
So Rob, looking back at that experience and that journey, and looking back through your life leading up until that point, what are the big takeaways or lessons that you've taken from that experience?
Well, one of them is you don't know what's going to happen today, right? I mean, every single day things are changing, right? And so if you are blessed with, you don't have anything unless you have your health, right? And I just see so many people abuse themselves, and it's just like, people get sick, or, and they go, oh, I feel terrible for a couple of days, but, they have no idea what it's like a friend of mine just had a massive heart attack, and he survived that, and he actually died on the helicopter being airlifted to the hospital. And, so I hang around with him a lot, because when you've had a near-death experience, it's one thing to go to a funeral or get sick and think, oh, yeah, that was, I'm fine. But like when you've had a near-death experience, I don't think you're ever the same after that. And I think it really deepened my relationships with other people, right? Because I think you really connect. Just like meeting you, there's certain people that you just connect with that are more soulful, right? So I love hanging around with really soulful, curious, entrepreneurial people.
And Rob, what was thinking about those relationships? What was your greatest fear during that time? Can you maybe help us step into your shoes in terms of what it felt like to be on the precipice of losing, the people that matter to you the most, and also what was it like for them?
Yeah, well, I was sending out, I called it my giant brain journey or adventure, right? And I had a huge email list, so I'd send it out to people to let them know what's going on. And I kept all the emails. I have it in a book, right? So I can look back on all the wishes I had and how many people were thinking about me. And what's sad is when you're in the hospital, how few people actually come to see you. And, so my girlfriend was there, and I'm divorced. So my ex-wife came and brought the kids, and, they were they were younger and they were pretty horrified to see dad like that. And I remember they wanted to go have lunch, so I tried to walk downstairs to the food place in the hospital, but it was just everything I had to just get down there and sit with him. And my accountant came, Gary Lukey. I went to school with him, and he's been my accountant for years. I remember he popped in, and I facilitated a men's group when I was in EO. We had these forum groups like you have, right? So after I left EO, I've facilitated 2 or 3 different men's groups, which is kind of like a forum group. So some of the guys in my men's group came to see me, and you think that was it. That I could have died yesterday, and that was it. So I don't take things too seriously anymore.
And so tell us more about, the theme of this show is about the dichotomies. And when I say that word dichotomy, what comes to mind for you? What's your sort of relationship with that word?
Well, it's just, to me, it's just there's always a massive contrast, right? So what is the contrast and the struggle? I think everybody is struggling, right? And I think if we looked at each other and looked at it that way, like, what are you struggling with today, right? And really connected with people and really got deep, just like your whole podcast is all about that, right? That is life, right? And, you can imagine if people came in and told us what life was going to be like. I shared my life video that I made for my kids with you, right? But if people came into school when you were younger and told you, like, this is what your life could end up like, kids would go like, no way, that's never going to happen to me, right? And yet as you get older, I'm 60 years old now, but when you talk to people, especially that's had a near-death experience, right? And you really start talking about what were the moments in their life when you look backwards. And Steve Jobs talks about that. You can't see the dots when you look forward, but as you get older, the dots, those moments in life become really, learning points that change something in you dramatically, right? And that makes you who you are. And I love going to funerals because now that's where you hear all the, what were the moments in that person's life. But it's sad that they're not there to hear about them, right? And all the people that get up and talk about that person. But that's what life is all about. And I think this whole pandemic thing has really made people, really dig into their soul and look at what the heck are we doing. I think today the economy is so broken and people have never been in more debt, and and they're struggling with trying to keep up with their payments, and it's people are choking on it, and that is not the essence of life. And yet we are beamed by so many TV commercials when we're a kid, and now every person's got a smartphone, right? And you look at Instagram and TikTok, and everybody's showing these fake lives. And it's just, I feel sorry for all these young people that are having to filter out, over time, what really is important, what matters and what doesn't matter. But I think, you think of the billions of dollars that's spent to influence people to buy, right? We've got a big path to try and get people real.
Speaking of what really matters, Rob, what have you come to learn does really matter? And what are the practices that you put in place to ensure that you don't lose sight of that?
So what really matters to me is obviously it's just health, right? So I really take care of my health. And and really when you look at it, just hang around, like take care of yourself and be healthy, right? Then look at, did you sleep well, right? And do you have healthy relationships, and do you have healthy finances, right? And do you serve people in a healthy way? And if you literally just add healthy to all the different aspects of life and really look at where you're abusing yourself, so many people, and it starts with yourself. I think people have a really hard time loving themselves, right? So they act out in all these crazy ways because they don't really love themselves, right? And so when you look at people that really abuse themselves, it's sad. I was watching the news the other day in Vancouver. We have a real fentanyl problem here. And they're saying all these folks that live on the street somehow got moved into some of these old hotels and stuff in Vancouver. And they've got that CERB money. And they are ODing. Like we're getting more people a month are dying of fentanyl here than of COVID, right? And it's because they've never had money like that. So they're getting put in a nice hotel room and they're buying all these drugs and they're just abusing each other. Well, if you're in a hotel where everybody's doing that, right? It's sad.
Yeah, I love that idea of looking at the main areas of life, and this is the thing I realized, Rob, over time as well, is that I think we all are looking for so much significance and meaning in our lives, but at the end of the day, we're all cut from the same cloth. It's like our lives are so much more similar than they are really different. We want good relationships. We want a good night's sleep. We want to feel well and healthy and have good finances. So I just love putting healthy in front of all those things. And to me, I think the word healthy, it's like the middle path. It's not one extreme or the other.
So the categories are sleep, healthy eating, healthy exercise, healthy relationships, right? Healthy fun, because I think a lot of people and I've seen a lot of my friends, especially, with us being an EO and when you're younger, I've seen a lot of people that end up with a lot of money when they're younger don't have healthy fun, right? It's like they start binging on the dark side. And then it's having healthy finances, right? And I think the biggest problem we have today in our growing society, or in North America anyway, is most people don't have healthy finances, right? And so when you're really struggling financially, then you start kind of punishing yourself with your sleep, and you see how people start eating bad things. They don't take care of their bodies, right? They abuse their relationships. So when COVID hit, I don't know if I told you, but I started a new online course called Thriving in Chaos. So it's at thrivinginchaospro.com, and I built that course over COVID, and that it basically shows you, how to take those pieces of that story and look at how you're doing out of 1 to 5, and then I built a whole bunch of modules in there to help make it easy for you to kind of get back. So it's all about focus plus your actions equal your results.
And Rob, being 60 now, how's your relationship with death changed or evolved?
Well, I'm totally ready to go tomorrow if I have to. I'll go with a big smile on my face. So after I sold the park, the property that we had, I've kind of been on a 10-year sabbatical. So I kind of have been off since 50, and I'm now 60. So I've had my theme park in the summer kind of moving around, and I had people doing that for me. And I've just started kind of fired up my consulting business again. But I've had a really nice break. And, I have a beautiful girlfriend. She just moved about 2 blocks from me. She's got a couple teenagers now. And my son, who's 24, he moved into my building a year ago. So he lives on the 3rd floor and I'm on the 16th floor. So I, can see him a lot. And I see my daughter a lot. And my mom's passed away. And, I have a lot of friends, and we just have enjoyed, I've really deeply enjoyed the last 10 years for sure.
What have been some of the more memorable experiences of the last 10 years?
Just getting up every day and having the freedom to do whatever I want. That's just, been a blessing. I've had a real, being an entrepreneur like you, I've been chasing my tail and being up and down financially for years. So to get up, with money, and to be able to not have to set an alarm and just get up every day and do what I want to do and just relax, right? And just walk around and enjoy things. And I've done some traveling, and, now because we can't go anywhere, we've really had to make Vancouver kind of our staycation. Like, what are we going to do for fun today? And so, yeah, it's been interesting, but it's really about deepening your relationships, because we've been spending a lot more time with our friends, just doing really unique things. There's a place in Vancouver called the Tiki Bar that just opened again. So we ended up going there last Saturday night and had just a blast.
Speaking of dichotomy, and we talked about the contrast, where do you notice any dichotomies in your own life today where you maybe feel kind of torn or pulled in opposing directions over something?
Well, right now I got to, talk about healthy finances. I've burned through a lot of cash in the last 10 years. So that's why I've fired up my consulting business again, and I got to get back to maintaining my cash flow. So that's, everything else. I got a beautiful apartment and I got great relationships and I'm very healthy. and have been having lots of fun. I sleep like a bear, and so the thing that I got to work on now is just cash flow.
Got it. And I'm curious, right? The kind of going back into business now and winding up the consulting stuff. Based on everything that you learned from your past experience, what are the top 1 to 2 to 3 kind of key lessons that you're bringing into this next chapter?
As far as my consulting business goes?
Yeah, as far as business goes, because look, I mean, you've had a lot of success. You built a great park, you sold it, and for many entrepreneurs, many people listening, that's to take a 10-year sabbatical, that's almost like a dream come true, right? So yeah, what have been your biggest lessons in business?
So the thing we haven't talked about was when I was in my 20s, I left the family business and got into the consulting business. When there was a guy named Mike Vance who worked directly with Walt and Wright Disney, and he left the Disney Corporation and came to speak at our amusement park convention. And I was sitting in the audience with my parents, and it was one of those moments in life where you go, that's what I want to be doing. And so I left the family business when I was in my mid-20s and started the consulting business. Basically, today it's called customer experience. And that's really what you sell in the theme park business. So I did that for many years and sold intellectual property all over the world. So when my parents got divorced, I was doing very well in the consulting business, and I had to come back and kind of take over the family business again. But I didn't run it myself. So with everything I'd learned, working with all these consulting companies, is I got really good at scaling experiences, but not having to be there. So I did it through other people. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on now. But the thing I think you got to be selling today is you got to understand that everybody is part of your sales team. Everybody is selling an experience, right? And you're winning or losing sales based on your experience. Yet hardly anybody understands that they're really selling an experience. They're still competing on price, right? And their place and whatever product they are. And so what I do is I go in and help people, really align their front line to understand is that, especially with speed today, because if you don't explain this to your front line at the blink of an eye, they're so overwhelmed in conflicting priorities and challenges right now that they just are not interested. So I think that's kind of one of them. The second one is you've got to be selling a painkiller today, not a vitamin. And I think today the thing is, I think we've got internally our biggest challenge is conflicting priorities on what matters most in the business. And I think what matters most today, it's all about getting and keeping customers. But what matters most is keeping customers, because that's where the profit is. People don't have time anymore to be buying customers with the problem with the, with everything that's going on out there and the COVID safety protocols and all that. And so, I'm really, kind of really focusing on working in the franchise industry to look at what sectors in the franchise industry are selling a painkiller, not a vitamin, and then helping those teams scale across Canada.
Thinking about the future, right? I'm curious to get your take on you've had a lot of experience in business and seeing so many different technologies evolve and develop and that kind of thing. How do you feel about the next 20, 30, 40 years on the planet? Are you optimistic for the species? Are you optimistic for us being able to solve some of the big problems of today? Do you see the future as better or worse than it is today or 10, 20, 30 years ago?
No, I'm completely an optimist. And what I think is going to absolutely blow people's minds is the rate of change and what technology is going to do to help, help us, the ones that want to live a healthier life, right? Do it. And I study a lot about the future and tech and AI and all these trends that are coming. And I mean, you start looking at how you can grow, organs and stuff in a petri dish and your own organ and put it back in you, right? So I think I think the baby boomers as we age are going to crush the healthcare system. But I think what's coming in behind that is from a disruptive point of view is all the new innovations in tech that are going to help us. and the way we grow food. And I think this pandemic, right now we're having a pandemic, we're in a recession, and there's basically a revolution going on in the streets all at the same time, right? And I think it's going to really, I think we're going to get hammered economically, and I think that's really going to have people start to look at what's really important in life. And I see it with my own kids, right? They are so not into, like, when I was early 20s, I already had my own house. I was married by the time I was 22 and had 3 cars, and right, and that's just what you did. And my kids is just like, they're so not into getting a house, and it's all about Airbnb and Ubers and DoorDash, and right, it's this, they live in the moment, right? And so all you got to do is have cash flow to drive those things that you need. But they're like, well, why would you own anything? My son just even sold his car, right? And so he's now just Ubers everywhere. And you see, when the pandemic was on, I live downtown, and you just see all the people that deliver food to my building, right, on bicycles. It's insane. And you can get anything delivered to your place now. So I think, and even traveling, right? There's a new, can't remember what it's called, but somebody was pitching this to me a couple months ago. But you basically buy a week or two and stay in these amazing, unique properties all over the world. You can only book it for a week or two at a time. So you can only stay there for that week. And then next month you can book another week somewhere else, right? But they've got places all over North America. So I think the whole plug and play, figure out what kind of lifestyle you want to have, and then look what technology's done in this sharing economy, is going to have massive influence on people that have stuff, right? I don't think having stuff today is the answer anymore. I think the answer is having cash flow and freedom. And the thing most people don't have is they don't have any freedom, right? So the more money they make, the less time people have.
I think a lot of people listening could relate to that. Rob, I just want to thank you for coming on and spending time sharing more of your life story and journey. It's just been, what a remarkable story you've had, and I think everyone listening would have got the sense of just what an impactful experience that brain tumor would have been in your life, and how it's obviously changed your perspective and your outlook, and I think there's so many lessons we could learn from that. So thank you.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate you connecting on LinkedIn, and I look forward to seeing you I'm either going to be in Toronto, or if you come out here to Vancouver, and we'll go and sit on a deck somewhere in the sunshine and share our good fortune.
Enjoy. Hey, Rob, final question to leave us for today is, what do you feel is the greatest gift you feel that you can offer others or the world? And this is to people generally. I think the greatest thing for us to do right now is help other people, right? I think it's all about people, and stop selling and, acquiring and fighting over stuff, and really just get up every day and see who you can help, right? And just fill your day that way. And I think if we all did that, this world would be a much better place. Awesome. Rob Ell, thanks so much. Thank you. Hey, so thanks for listening. The more I record these episodes, the more I realize this show is as much about navigating the emotional journey of business as it is about exploring the dichotomies my guests face along the way. I've come to believe the more awareness we can bring to our emotions, the better the decisions we can make, and therefore the better we can navigate these dichotomies as they come up in our lives. And look, at the end of the day, I just love talking life, business, philosophy with like-minded people who really think deeply about the world, their business, and how to lead a good life. So if you want to connect with me or learn more about some of the things I'm up to, just head to www.mikejamesreid, that's REID.com. There's a whole bunch of links to some of the cool stuff we do at Dent, plus a little more on me as well. Otherwise, you can follow me or connect with me on all the usual socials just by adding /Mike James Reid or searching for Mike Reid as well. Okay, until next time, thanks so much for listening. And one final request is, if you've enjoyed this show, please give it a rating or review on Apple or Google Podcasts or any other way that you listen to the show. Ratings help the show get found and just out to more people who will hopefully love it as much as you do. Plus, it tells me to keep putting these episodes together for you. So thanks so much, and much love from me.